Hello, my name is Kip Carr. Today is June 18th, 2025, and I want to talk about growing up in Bowling Green, Kentucky in like the 70s and 80s. The Bowling Green that I grew up in, that I was born in, that my first memories uh, of everything, literally everything, was an amazing, incredible place. Um, We lived on 11th Street, right across the street from 11th Street School. And so my older brother, he played little league at the baseball field that was behind 11th Street School. And uh, once the um, little league was over, um, it was like a ritual that we would always go to like the chicken box. And chicken box was this uh it was like a pickup place right on the curve, right on Broadway. And I mean, you could smell like the fries uh like pretty much for several blocks, all right? And it was close enough to our house that we could walk over there. Um Burger King uh, was built while we were there. Burger King was right on the corner of 11th and the bypass. I vaguely remember there was an old house that was torn down to make way for Burger King. I don't know how I remember that. And then Burger Chef was further down the bypass, just maybe a few doors down. Um, and then CDS number 7 drugstore, where my sister uh, worked while she was in high school. And I'm trying to think, did I get any prescriptions filled at CVS number 7? I don't think so. Very very rare. The reason why is um, I had like bronchitis from the time I was like really little until maybe 16 or 17, and I had to take this awful medicine, Marax. And so, what I remember is Mr. Holland. We called him Doc Holland. Um, Holland's Pharmacy was right next to or right near Riley's Bakery. And this is what I remember. I remember going to the pediatrician and then getting the prescription, and then Doc Holland would always insist on wanting to see me. And I was little. I was really little. And I remember my dad like picking me up and putting me like on the counter so that Doc Holland would come around and see me. He was a wonderful guy. Um Really, just really nice. That's what I remember. But that medicine was horrendous. He didn't have anything to do with that. But so what else do I remember about Bowling Green? I remember uh, Bowling Green Mall was the mall, like from the time uh, from my whole existence, and I didn't learn this until later that Bowling Green Mall actually opened maybe about 7 or 8 months after I was born. So for all of my existence, there's always been a Bowling Green Mall. All right. There was no development between 31W South and Scottsville Road. Matter of fact, I don't believe that Campbell Lane was even cut through there when I was little. Um, that was something that happened later on, like in the 70s or like late 70s, but in early 70s, no, not at all. Um, and I remember it was a treat to go to the mall. Um, Citizens National Bank had they had their branch like in the out parcel of the mall, and if the tellers would see any children in the car, then they would always like put a balloon or candy like in the tube. And so, we didn't even have to ask for it. They saw you in the car, they just knew to put them in there. And so that was definitely fun. That was cute. The one thing I remember, Castner Knott, which was the department store at Bowling Green Mall. He had Castner on one side, he had Woolco on the other. Then it was Super X drugstore that was like right in the center of the mall. And then actually A&P supermarket was there as well. But A&P was, they were quick to leave Bowling Green. Uh, so I think that by the time I was 9, 10, uh, Bowling Green went from having two A&Ps to zero. The other A&P was on Center Street, across from where the police department is now. And I don't know how I remember that, but I remember it very well. And let's see. So my mother, Georgiana Carr, now Hendricks, she worked at the time of my birth. She worked at Union Underwear, which is now part of the Fruit of the Loom family. But people in Bowling Green called it the Derby. And she went from there, and then somehow, I think by the time I was in kindergarten, she got an office job working at Model Cities, and Model Cities was the federal agency that I think was that coordinated like urban renewal and such. And so her office was in the gym of the old State Street High School. And I remember getting out of school and taking the bus and going down there. So, all right. So my earliest memories of school, I went to Jolly Time. That was they didn't call it pre-K then. Uh, they called it play school. Like that was part of the title. PLASSKOOL. Um, and I remember I was 4 years old when I started in pre-K, and so kindergarten was not even mandated in the state of Kentucky at that time. Um, so Jolly Time was a block from my home. Obviously, at being 8, 4 or 5, I wasn't walking down there by myself. Um, but I had like lots of family on both sides, both my mother's side and my father's side, that lived on Kenton Street. My grandparents, my mother's parents, as well as my father's sister, my father's niece and nephew, my father's first cousin and his wife. They all lived right there, right on Kenton, in the area where 11th Street Church is now. Let's see. What else do I remember about Bowling Green? I remember. I vaguely remember Kroger when it was on the bypass right there at 13th Street before you get to Murray's. And the one thing that I remember about that particular location is on the bypass side, they had a little store for Top Value stamps. And so I have been asking various people on uh, Facebook groups, do you remember the Top Value Stamp Store? And people keep confusing it with green stamps. Like, oh, that was Western Gateway. Yes, it was. But Top Value Stamps, when they had a store in Bowling Green, was right on the bypass. It was adjacent to Kroger. Now, something very interesting happened when they closed that location and they went further down 31W South Nashville Road. Uh, they when they closed Top Value Stamp Store, it did not reopen in the new location. But Kroger continued to. So Kroger gave out Top Value stamps. Houchins at that time gave out the S&H green stamps. All right, and that was pretty much predominant. I remember, God, I guess I was about 8, 9 years old, rounding up all of these green stamps in the house to make, I don't know how many books it was of stamps, but I got like a wall thermometer for it. Could have been 40 books. I don't know. I don't remember. But I think I was like in second grade. And that was the first thing that I remember purchasing on my own. And I don't remember like making purchases to get stamps. These were stamps that were like um, under the car seat, um, under the sofa cushion, uh, at the bottom of my mom's purse. Um, Back in those days, random stamps were just everywhere. But the first place that they usually were in the bottom of the brown paper bag that your groceries were in. So that was always the first place to find them. And then was it they had the 50, the 10, and like the one. And so yeah, it was a huge deal when you found like 50, like the 50 cent piece, the 50 cent stamp. Uh, God, let's see. We live not far from downtown, and Sears was an event for me. I enjoyed going to Sears. My first, so Sears had the Winnie the Pooh collection, and I remember being so excited about, my mom dressed me up in like the blazer and like the turtleneck with the little Winnie the Pooh logo. I thought I was in high cotton. Um, so around the time I was like 4 years old, I was in Little Mister Hilltopper, uh, and I want to say I was the first black to compete. It was a some sort of pageant. I don't know if it was any real talent to it. I think it was more of a beauty pageant. Who they thought was cute. I don't know. But all these years later, I mean, I'm realizing that that was pretty bold for a black kid in Southern Kentucky to be even allowed to compete. So I didn't win, of course, but what I remember is getting up on stage, and I was so shy I couldn't say a word, but I just remember just kind of waving at the crowd like this, and I've since seen the Daily News did like a profile of all the contestants, and uh, they listed me as being 2 years old, and I was actually four. And I'm thinking to myself, who would think that I was two in competing in this? Really? No, I was four. I was four. It was like the fall of '71, I think. So that was interesting. So, so went to Jolly Time, went through kindergarten, had the most amazing teacher, Ruth Compton. Oh my gosh, she was just incredible, absolutely amazing. Um, it really makes a difference who like your first teachers are because that really sets the course of how you feel about yourself and how you perceive learning. And so she was a really, really good person. And the director of Jolly Time was a lady by the name of Ruby Dodd. And Ruby Dodd lived on Barren River Road. Her and her husband, I think they had acreage. And at the end of every school year, they would invite all the kids from Jolly Time out to their house. And it was always an event. I clearly remember that. Um, but she was a lovely person. I was not a disciplinary problem, so they didn't have any problem with me at all. Um, there were a handful of blacks at Jolly Time, not a ton, because I think that the majority of blacks that were my age were in Head Start, which was down at High Street. Um, but there were a few, there were a handful. All right. I do remember a guy that I know. I'm not calling his name, but I remember the two of us talking about like where were we going to first grade, and we were just so excited. He was so excited about he was going to Parker Bennett. I was excited because I was going to Parker Gray, and 11th Street was shutting down the end of my kindergarten year. So otherwise, I could have just gone right across the street. Uh, First grade, I was being bused, even though I wasn't on the bus, but literally being bused to Potter Gray, and their zone at that time expanded uh, beyond the bypass. Um, so So I was there. So Potter Gray, when I was in first grade, it had, in terms of black students, it had me, my brother, my two first cousins, uh, the family down the street, and there were about eight of them, and that was about it. And then the end of my first grade year, they were shutting down High Street as an elementary school. Um, so before I was born, High Street ceased to be a high school, and those students they transitioned to Bowling Green High. Uh, but I clearly remember it as a elementary school, but it did not hang around for a long period of time before it was shut down, and then uh, its remaining years it was a recreation center. It was part of Bowling Green. What is it? Bowling Green Parks and Recreation. Yeah, when it shut down completely as a school. Um, the complexion of Potter Gray completely changed when High Street closed, and all of those kids from Second, Third, Chestnut uh, were bussed over to Potter Gray. I remember we had May Day, like the end of the school year, and the High Street kids came to visit Potter Gray to acclimate them for the next school year. And what I didn't know is that I wouldn't be at Potter Gray uh, when the school year started because I would be going into second grade. My parents divorced, so my mother found an apartment for us, and it was in the county school system. And Warren Elementary on Loop Drive had just finished their school building. I mean, it was brand new. I remember the dirt that was along the building, and so that's where I was for the first part of second grade, and I believe it was Elaine Edens. I don't know how I remember that. She was a second grade teacher. I was there until Christmas, and then uh, my mother decided to move in with her mother down on State Street, and so I ended up going back to Potter Gray, and so Potter Gray had completely changed from when I remembered from the end of first grade when there were hardly any blacks to your classroom now having about 30% black. Okay, not black majority, but definitely way more blacks than it was. So that was it. That was interesting. So did that second grade, and then I think beginning of third grade year, my mother was trying to get me into Jones Jaggers lab school, which was part of Western, and she said, "I'll make you a deal if you just go to Parker Bennett 1 year." By that time, we had moved from my grandmother's house on State Street. My mother found a house in what is now called Northern Heights. It wasn't called Northern Heights then. And so my mom was like, "Go to Parker Bennett for 1 year, and then hopefully you'll be able to get into Jones Jaggers." Jones Jaggers had this humongous waiting list of kids trying to get in. And the one thing I remember, I was able to actually make it in for fourth grade, going into fourth grade. I think I got the end of my third grade year. I would be accepted uh, in going into fourth grade. That was like the fall of '76, and uh, what I also remember is that that was the very first presidential election that I paid very close attention to because that was Carter and Ford. And I remember watching television with my grandmother and watching the commercials like Jimmy Who and all of that stuff. I remember that. Then I also remember staying up election night. I don't know how they allowed me to do that, but I just remembered staying up. We didn't know who the winner of the White House was until, God, it was like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. Um, but excuse me, by the time we woke up, then I think that Ford had conceded. But I remember clearly watching ABC News, Harry Reasoner and Barbara Walters. Um, excuse me, for their coverage. So let me break down telephone and television back in the '70s in Bowling Green. First off the bat, our primary station was Channel 13, WBKO. This was long before cable, but 13, no matter where you lived in Bowling Green, you could pretty much it was a clear signal. Um, and then, depending on the type of antenna back in those pre-cable days, uh, for the most part, we could get Channel 4, WSM, now WSMV, and then WLAC TV, which went on to become WTVF, which it is now. Then, to a lesser extent, Channel 8, which was the ABC affiliate. And then somehow I think 8 became 2. 2 and 8 switched. So 2 became the ABC affiliate. But that was the weak signal. We couldn't really get that channel at all. And channel 8 became the public became PBS. All right. So um what I remember is watching the news, uh, and becoming familiar with the different personalities, and I guess that's how uh, my being a local news junkie uh, got its start by watching Channel 13, and then of course Channel 5, Chris Clark in Nashville. Um, but the one thing that I remember was that, like on weekends, uh, Channel 13 did not have like a late night news. So they would go straight into, they would go from like ABC programming to like Run for Your Life, the Ben Gazzara show. And then when that was over, that's when My Old Kentucky Home was playing. And there was a rule in my house that when that started playing, you needed to be in the bed and your eyes had better be closed by the time that started. We didn't have TVs in every room and stuff, so it's like when the beginning of My Old Kentucky Home started, that meant for the TV to go off and for you to go to bed. Okay. Channel 5 had, what was it, the poem High Flight. Same thing, same exact thing. All right. There was no 24-hour TV. When the national anthem was played at night and then again in the morning, uh, the station went, it went off the air. I mean, it went. There was nothing. There was no infomercials. Uh, Nothing at all. All right. And it's hard to believe that was only what 35 years ago that it was like that. But woo. So what else do I remember? So Channel 5 had what was it, The Big Show, which was like a movie, some type of B movie, um every afternoon. And I remember, I think Channel 13 at one point had Three Stooges on. Like when you got home from school, Three Stooges was on like 3:30, 4 o'clock. Okay. Then later years they would have Bonanza, and I was sitting on my couch eating a candy bar, watching Bonanza, the Cartwrights, when ABC News interrupted Bonanza to announce that Elvis had died. So if you want to know where I was, what is it, August 16th, 1977, I was in the living room of my home on Scotway in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Probably that was probably a Heath bar I was eating, but yeah, that just so I've always had a thing for dates, and we had a encyclopedia. We had World Book. I think it was 71. So the year I started kindergarten, we got a World Book a set, and um, the the sections on the presidents and the states. I would just kind of like take pictures, mental pictures of that, and just kind of commit that to memory. Um, and that's kind of where my love of like government and politics, that's exactly where it started. Okay. World Book was our Google. We did, you know, um, you see these memes with like a picture of a set of encyclopedias and people talking about, yeah, this was our internet back then. Literally, it really was. I mean, it had everything. It had everything, and um, I like the fact that I could just take a chapter or like a book and really study it very carefully. And I learned so much from the encyclopedia. So, what else about television? Uh, yes. I mean, kids were remote controls that day. Those that and back in those days, I clearly remember using wire pliers to have to change the channel. And the channel only went in one direct. It only went clockwise. You couldn't go counterclockwise. But if you only got two or three channels, you were doing a lot of shifting. Click, 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 click. Uh, so yeah. Now telephone. Um, we had so back in those days. This was after like the BR 549 days. Um, we had when I learned my phone number for the first time. I learned 5 digits. Didn't have to because your phone your phone number is 7 digits, but we didn't have to use area codes back then. I think it was 502. That was before 270. So my number at that time was 20814, I think, and I remember learning my telephone number. And what else do I remember about telephones? Let's see, what else do I remember about telephones? I remember I loved reading the phone book. Uh, and every year the phone book would come out with these really interesting covers. And I would always be really excited about seeing like the phone book and seeing our listing in the phone book. And everybody was in the phone book. If you needed somebody's number, you looked in the phone book. You know, um, let's see. I'm trying to think. Um, so let me go back to Sears for a minute. The Wish book. The Wish book was huge, and uh, the Wish book was Sears Christmas catalog, and that was the catalog that had like the toys in it, and it always came in a brown wrapper, like paper bag, and I know that I would get my own catalog, my brother would get his own, and then we were able to pick what we wanted out of our own catalogs. Okay. Woolco, which was in Bowling Green Mall, had I mean, they had a toy section that was second to none. I remember getting I think it was like the Star Trek console from Woolco, and I don't know where it came from, but I wanted and got one Christmas Steve Austin, the action figure, and then the girl across the street got Jamie Summers, uh, Bionic Woman. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah. Um, but Bowling Green was a very very interesting place. Um, I remember I never got a chance to ride on Amtrak, but my mother and my aunt, we walked to the train station and saw them off. I think they went to Chicago, and we did not live very far from the depot. And sadly, I think by the time I was 12 or 13, that's when Amtrak cut all of its service off, like between Louisville and Nashville. So I did not get to ride Amtrak until I was long left Bowling Green. But so my dad was a truck driver, and he worked for a company that just manufactured and distributed caskets. And the route, some of the routes that he took regularly, some of them were like Tompkinsville, Summershade. I remember Summershade. Uh, there was a man that raised rabbits, and every time my dad went to Summershade, I always wanted a rabbit. Okay. Then another place that he would go pretty frequently was Upper Sandusky, Ohio. I always remembered him talking about Upper Sandusky. My brother went more than I went because he was older. Um, but let's see. So Wise Funeral Supply was like right behind our house, and the former mayor of Bowling Green, Pop Wise, that was his business, and he had passed it on to, um, I believe that's his son-in-law that ended up running the business, who my dad worked for, and the the house that I was brought home from the hospital was his house. Um, so, any rate, what else do I remember? I remember in kindergarten we would take these very interesting field trips. Um, One time we'd go to Riley's Bakery. I mean, we went all the way in the kitchen. That was then we went to the post office, and Mr. Nam was still postmaster then, and gave us like the VIP tour. Um, we went two or three other places, but those two really how they really stand out to me. All of these years, over 50 years later. Um, but I remember, um, let's see, WBGN. We would listen to WBGN, um, and Mr. What was it? I think it was on WKCT. Mr. Deemer would come on and just kind of read all of the specials that was going on at DNF over on Adams Street, and we didn't really go over there very much, but it was very interesting. Okay. So let's see what else. Bypass had, you know, the that Long John Silver's in Bowling Green was one of the first outside of Lexington. Then you had Burger Farm. I mentioned Burger Chef. You had now Burger Queen was on Center Street, um, right behind where Royal Barn Florist was. Who could forget that? Um, I noticed Bowling Green was pretty much the same as a kid, but I remember the most dramatic change was they when they you know obviously urban renewal when they got rid of all the houses around second, third, center Kentucky, but more importantly than that, when they reconfigured 6th and 7th and they moved the fire station from 10th Street downtown to right at Fairview, I remember there was a sign that talked about how much money in road funds that it would cost, and I clearly remember, and I think they moved back Howard's bicycle shop. Please let me know if that's true, but I'm almost sure that house was moved back because Howard's, that's where everybody went uh, to get their bicycles, as well as getting them repaired. If you needed serious repair on your Schwinn, you went to Howard's. Then, of course, they had Raleigh later on. That was on Broadway, I think. Um, but let's see here. What else do I remember? When AMP pulled out, I think a couple of the managers of AMP they came up with this chain called Wendell's, and Wendell's lasted about 17 minutes. But I do remember going in there. It was nice, clean, friendly, but it shut down very quickly, and then I don't think that those spaces were occupied again for years, for years and years and years. And I know that when AMP left the mall and when Wendell's left the mall, Bowling Green Mall did not get another supermarket until Kroger moved in where Castronot moved out. When they shut down uh, their store in the present location of WKU South Campus, where the Nicely Center and all of that is, they moved down to the mall, to the old mall. And I'm trying to think. I think that Bowling Green only had one Kroger at one time back in those days. I think when I moved back in the '90s is when Bowling Green started to have like multiple Kroger stores. When Riverside Drive-In was shut down and the Kroger right there was built, and then the Kroger on Scottsville Road, so that's two. Then they have the Kroger on, what is it, Nashville Road, Campbell Lane, so that's three. That's three Kroger that I know of. Yeah. So let's see. Got my first haircut at Jimmy's Barbershop, Reverend Carpenter, on my first birthday, March 28th, 1968. And I don't. The only reason that I know that is because it was in the baby book. Um, but that date is so significant because Martin Luther King was assassinated 1 week later. So my birth and his death, you know, it's amazing that our lives intersected for exactly 53 weeks, 53 weeks to the day, from the time of my birth to the time of his passing. And I had a chance to actually tell Reverend Dr. Bernice King that earlier this year. She was kind of astounded, and ironically, her and I share the same birthday. She's a little older than I am, but any rate, I remember when Hell's Angels came to town. Beach Bend was the destination spot in terms of amusement park back in the day. I remember very clearly that uh, either a dime, and who didn't have a dime back in those days, but you'd be surprised, or a report card. Now, I don't remember them like saying, okay, well, you have to have A's in order to get in. I think any report card, even if it was F's, you could get in. Okay, they just wanted to see your report card. I thought it was a great thing. I thought it was great. So when I was really little, I know that my family would go to um, Beach Bend to swim every week. I guess they weren't. If we were not at Beach Bend, we were at Mammoth Cave. I mean, we lived in those two places, and yeah, remember that very well. Um, I remember when the Sixth Street underpass was built, and the old underpass, which has finally been covered over. You can't even tell that it was there. Um, I thought that the convention center was gonna go like right in that area, like adjacent to like the train depot. That was long before Heartland and the Sloan Center and all of that. But somehow I got this feeling that it was gonna go right on Sixth Street. I don't know where I got that. Um, but the one thing, Bowling Green, growing up African American, my if I didn't know people, my family would know other people. Uh, it was really like a small town, okay, and we really had that village concept when I was a very small child. Um, the community really changed when General Motors came in. What was that, 79 or 80? And um, I think it changed for the better, overall better. But I think the downside of that was we didn't really know everybody anymore. Um, so so the 80s were a little different from the 70s, but the 70s were an incredible time. Holiday Inn, Holidome on the bypass. Everybody was flocking down there. Everybody. So, my cousin had a wedding reception at Town Towers back when it was briefly like bachelor apartments right on College Street, College and 12th, I think. Yeah, College and 12th. And by the time I reached junior high, it had shifted to senior housing, which is what I believe it is now. Um, but yeah, I remember I used to have this thing for station wagons and going to Scottsville Road and checking out like the Vista Cruisers at Howell Oldsmobile Cadillac. Oh my gosh, wow! Because the Vista Cruisers had like the little glass section up top, the little visor. So what else do I remember? Hmm, I'm gonna have to really give it some thought because I'm grasping for straws now. But I'm down to 50 minutes. But what I really want to do, I hope that this video really encourages you to think about what you remember about Bowling Green. Um, what Louisville Road was like back in the day. I remember my mother worked at Claudia Sanders' Dinner House on Old Louisville Road. She also worked at Jerry's. And then, of course, my first cousin was longtime manager. He eventually became a regional manager at Jerry's, but I think his heart was being a restaurant manager. He was truly one of the greatest hospitality aficionados ever. Um, and yeah, so um, but I did see a lot of changes in the community from the time I was, I don't know, 7 or 8 to the time I was 17. And urban renewal devastated my area. Um, I have a kinship about Jonesville because a lot of my family members were living in Jonesville. And Mount Zion Church was, I think, um, like the year before I before I was born, is when I think the final acquisition took place. So that really kind of hit home for me. Um, I'm I'm gonna have to wrap up because this thing is telling me storage is low. But I'm gonna do some more of these.